Grappling with the Gray, forum for promoting an ethical mindset and ethical decision-making. Help us more clearly see both sides of complex issues, better navigate the moral challenges of everyday life. I'm Rabbi Unison Goldson, and I would like to welcome my guest today. With me is Mark Brown, who is a world champion international speaker, executive coach, artificial intelligence software advisor, and most important, devoted husband of his wife, Andrew. And here on 46 minutes notice is Mark O'Brien, standing in for our scheduled guest who had a last-minute conflict. He is founder and principal of O'Brien Communications Group, a B2B brand management and marketing communications firm, and host of The Anxious Voyage, syndicated radio show about life's trials and triumphs. And Kimi Hirotsu Ziemski is founder of KSB Partnership, providing project management and project leadership courses on workshops to improve team dynamics and communications. Thank you all for being with me today.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
And here's our topic. In the wake of October 7th, Columbia University has taken center stage amidst concerns about campus anti-Semitism. After a May 31st open forum addressing student safety and campus culture, 3 college deans were suspended for exchanging dismissive texts during the program. These included vomit emojis in reference to an op-ed by a rabbi, and the suggestion that Jewish groups were exploiting the issue to boost fundraising revenues. Ironically, the dean who announced the suspensions was a 4th participant in the email exchanges, for which the other 3 were suspended. He made no mention of his own involvement, but he did decry what he called an invasion of privacy by the unnamed individual who photographed the text messages from the row behind the deans. Does he have a point? Does this constitute an invasion of privacy? The photographer claimed in an op-ed published anonymously because of fear of reprisal that they considered a moral imperative to report and publicize these remarks. What if the texts had been about private medical information? What if they had been about human trafficking? Those cases seem more black and white and less gray. Or is the subject matter irrelevant since perhaps there is no presumption of privacy in a public place? The floor is open.
I would disagree. I think that there is a presumption of privacy. Just whether or not it's valid is an entirely different question. People have a tendency to believe that they're living in a bubble, and somehow or another, whatever they're paying attention to, unless they've chosen to make it public, is nobody else's business. This in the face of social media, where people are recording themselves doing remarkably not public things on a regular basis, baffles me. But it seems to be a common human trait that I run into. If I post something to social media, it's public. But if I don't choose to post it, you don't have a right to post on my behalf.
The first thing that went through my mind was something I think I heard for the first time during the Clinton administration, which is that character is what you do when no one is watching. And I also, in relation to what you were saying, Kimi, I wonder if there was a presumption on the part of the dean that he might be or he should be judged differently because of the position that he held. And I also loved in the article you shared with us, Jonathan, that it says the dean, Joseph Sword, issued a private apology. So here we have another one of those things. This private apology ends up in an article on the web. How private is that?
Well, I won't tell anybody if you don't.
Okay, my lips are sealed.
But to your point about integrity is something what you do when no one's watching. I think about that a lot. Certainly for those people of faith, someone's always watching. But today, there should be a presumption that someone's not only watching but videoing. I mean,
Yes.
virtually nothing escapes about the public record, and be careful what you do because you may end up going viral. Mark?
Mark the less. Okay. I have a different take on this. I'm wondering why these individuals, honestly, why would were they relieved of their duties? Is it because in someone's opinion they didn't agree with what they believed? Because what I see here is one's own personal opinion. If I don't like it, I will claim the moral high ground and say it was my moral imperative to let the world know that I disagree with you and therefore you should be canceled. And that is what's happening very often now. It's not a matter of so much a moral imperative. It's moral in terms of my opinion, what I believe. I disagree with you, therefore I will play that moral card to out you and hopefully therefore to cancel you based upon one truth. I disagree with you. We have here personal, private communications within a group. Okay, I disagree. That's garbage to me. Ugh, I don't like it. What's so wrong about that?
And might that not be a very apt demonstration of the need for civility? Because first of all, why on earth would you think that that was a good way to handle a disagreement? You're quite right. Thank you for pointing that out.
Well, keep in mind that the person who took the photograph and publicized it or circulated it is not the person who decided what the repercussions would be. Is it in a forum that is supposed to be addressing a serious problem?
Mhm.
If people in leadership positions are expressing a dismissive attitude towards that problem, is that something that should be brought to light? Does that reflect on their fitness to be holding positions of leadership, particularly in an academic institution?
Well, I want to back up a little bit. I'm not going to answer the question just yet because I'm thinking you said the individual who took the photographs was not the one who decided the outcome. In 2024, you're almost pretty sure what's going to happen when someone posts something that somebody else wrote for the purpose of the world to see, and they won't even identify themselves. They'll remain anonymous. I suspect they knew what would happen, perhaps not to the extent, but it knew it would not be seen and forgotten immediately. They knew there'd be a consequence. They knew there'd be fallout. Otherwise, they would have said, here, I did this, and here's why I did it. So I'm concerned about the motivation, and I may not agree with you fully regarding he had no idea or didn't decide. I believe they knew something would happen. Exactly what? I can't say. But they knew something would happen or they wouldn't have done it.
Well, I agree they hoped something would happen. That I think is for sure.
And I think that plays to your earlier remark, Mark, that whoever it is that took these photographs and turned them over or revealed them, did it, and in all likelihood did it anonymously because he disagreed with what he was seeing on those phones.
If he agreed, no photographs, no story.
Yeah.
That also brings up a kind of an interesting dilemma, because I would suggest that there isn't one person that I know, possibly excluding you, Rabbi, who hasn't on occasion participated in a conversation that is just at the outside edge of their own comfort zone and just at the outside edge of their level of agreement, rather than get in there's another word for what I was about to say, rather than the one that came immediately to mind, rather than getting to a match of texting back and forth about why somebody probably shouldn't express that opinion right then and there. They chose to participate in the conversation. Whether or not they actually 100% wholeheartedly agreed with that perspective, I think might be open to discussion. And I think that's also one of the things that reinforced their expectation of privacy. It was sort of like, well, I'm okay. I'm going to give you this in the dining room of my own home, and tomorrow we're not even going to think about this conversation because you're a guest in my house, and maybe I'm just for the moment. It's more in my interest to keep the peace a little bit.
That makes me wonder if in the exchange, if one or more of the parties involved in the text exchange might have been conforming and thinking, oh, I'm just going to go along with this because whatever, it's expected of me. It's going to make the other people in this exchange feel better.
And we'll have the real conversation later.
Yeah. Or perhaps not at all.
Perhaps not at all.
And am I misremembering this, Jonathan? I think I saw on one of the photographs of the phones something about the campus rabbi was, and I forget the verb, but it was something like normalizing or attempting to normalize Hamas. Is that what I saw?
I mean, I don't think the rabbi wasn't doing that. I think that was basically the intent of the discussion, was the concern over the normalization of anti-Semitism.
Okay, I remembered that, but Mark has an interesting point. I don't know. I'm about to say something that might be considered terribly rude. But if you are in a position of leadership, as long ago as when the book Making Magic came out, Lee Cockrell talked about how his wife, as he was leaving the door one day, he was the chief of operations for Disney World for 16 years. He was walking out the door and he was grousing about something. And she said, Lee, might want to remember that somebody's always watching you.
You reminded me that John McCain, and this also is going back to the Clinton administration, he was repeated for having, he told a joke that was it wasn't racist or profane, but it was cruel. Happened to be very funny, but I'm not going to repeat it here. And it came to light, and his explanation was that it was in bad taste, but he thought it was in a private setting, and I think that certainly if we go back far enough, I know for myself, growing up, ethnic jokes were commonplace. There was a whole series of books, the book of Polish jokes, the book of Italian jokes, the book of Jewish jokes, and some of them
short people jokes.
What's that?
Short people jokes.
Well, that was a song too.
I know.
But of course, the song was a parody, which many people missed. But we told jokes about other races. We told them about our own races, and everybody seemed okay with that. I think perhaps we're better off not telling those jokes, but at the same time, we have become much more thin-skinned, and I'm not sure that's really in the same category as speaking about an issue in a way that diminishes the issue, particularly at the time when you're supposed to be supporting or at least engaging the issue as something that's worthy of attention.
I found what I was referring to. It was in the article you shared, Jonas, and one of the people involved in the text exchange was named Crom. Crom used vomit emojis to refer to an op-ed by Columbia's campus rabbi, Yonah Hein, that had warned about the normalization of Hamas. That's where I picked that up. And to your point about ethnic jokes, some of my favorite jokes are Irish jokes. I wonder if I could get in trouble for telling them.
Probably.
Yeah, I guess.
Probably. there is a sense, at least in the papers that I've been reading, that there's going to be an enormous amount of practical damage that is going to be brought to light about the level of sensitivity about certain issues and certain dilemmas. And it's gotten so bad that I have received a letter from a client asking me to, because this is somebody who's hired me over and over again, asking me to erase the term ladies and gentlemen.
Wow.
Because it's binary. And I respect their choice. I respect their request. I'm a little annoyed by it. But for a reason that I think people might not recognize. If you want me to stop using a term that has been, for most of my life, a sign of respect for the people that I'm referring to, then give me, please, at least a suggestion of what you want me to substitute that will convey the same level of respect. I like to think the people in most of my audiences are pretty dang bright.
Yeah, we actually had an episode where we talked about a case in Britain where a teacher lost her job for coming into class and saying, "Good morning, girls," or "Good afternoon, girls," in a girls' school. In a school that on the
I remember
website,
that story.
On the website, it's called a girls' school.
Mhm.
And this was really beyond the pale to my way of thinking. I know, Mark Brown, you told a story that I have repeated a number of times of someone who came up to you after a presentation and complained about your use of the word wife.
Yes, it happens. And just this week, I received an email from an organization, and they mentioned my partner, and I sent an email back saying it's okay for you to call her my wife, as she has been for the last 42 years. I was nice about it, but I wanted to point out, and I did get a document some time ago. It was the end of 2022, and it article is the headline read, and I don't mean to delay this, 5 non-inclusive words I'm working to eliminate from my vocabulary in 2022. I know we've digressed for a second, but I want to clarify and kind of close the loop on this. And they included words like guys, that's crazy, it's insane. And the top 5 list is you replace disabled person with person with a disability, homeless with unhoused, slaves with enslaved people, epileptic person with epilepsy, and you also want to change blacklist and whitelist. You want to change master and slave to source and replica. The blind people with limited or without vision. A diabetic person is a person with diabetes, and of course, a minority is marginalized. An addict is a person struggling with an addiction. Wife, husband, girlfriend, boyfriend becomes partner. And one I know that some people will be rankled by, you replace straight with non-LGBTQ, which makes LGBTQ the standard. And there are many, including myself, who would not conform to that. That being said, language in itself clearly has a part to play. And I know I don't want to go down the rabbit hole here, but I do want to say that the language that we use, based on not only on the conversation we're having now, but what I've seen recently in what I call asocial media, not social media, it concerns with the level of offense I may feel at the language that you use. But my offense isn't enough. I want you to be tolerant of my position, but I'm not tolerant of yours, your opinion, or your language. Therefore, I will out you, and hopefully people who agree with me, they will cancel you and will show the power I have. And that speaks to the level of privacy. We want to post, as you said, Kim, what we want when we want. But we don't want someone else to have the right to post what we say because they overheard it or they saw it somewhere. So I'm wondering, is there a double or more standard applied when it comes to privacy or privacy, if you're not British, and what the world should see or hear from you in a season, in a time, in a world where CCTV cameras are ubiquitous, more so in countries like China than they are here. When I will complain, well, hang on now, my neighbor has a video camera in his house, but he can see my yard. He can see my back deck. I've paid my taxes. I bought this house. It's mine. I don't want his camera to see what's on my back deck. How can we fix that? I haven't heard too many arguments about it, but I confess after reading this, I did think about it because I have cameras at my home. And I wonder if someone will say, Mark, you're invading my privacy because your camera can see what happens in my yard. And we can really expand the conversation if we wish to. I don't think we want to, but I had to think about that. Now, can I expect privacy in a community where we all live? We all want to protect our own property, but the camera can't pick up what's over there. And indeed, I'm sure we all know where law enforcement has used the convenience store video, the library video, the video at the house of court, and we saw what happened. We got the individual, they were tried and found guilty, and it was useful. So do I then say, well, I still want my privacy, even though it may save lives? I've just muddied the waters. You're welcome.
You know, people sometimes ask me if I wish I could be younger again. And my answer is no, because then I'd have to put up with all this nonsense for longer. It's just, and Jonas, and we've actually talked about this stuff before, but how many sensitivities or contrived sensitivities can we A, keep track of, or B, tolerate? And it seems to me that all of this takes place at the expense of our unity. No wonder so many of us are so at odds with each other. Wow, it's just all separating and fracturing. Oh.
I used to, and I've said this many times, I used to listen to NPR and watch Fox News in an attempt to try to get a broader perspective. I really can't watch either one of them anymore. But NPR in particular, which I really only hear in 3 or 4 minute snippets in the car, I'd say there's about an 80% chance that the topic is going to be something divisive. And if it's not, it sort of jumps out of the speaker at me. Oh, wow, they're talking about something that's, might actually lend some sort of benefit to the world, instead of trying to figure out more ways we can divide ourselves up into tribes and camps. But I'd like to come back to the point I raised earlier, and more to our original topic, that if a person in a position of leadership and influence has a dismissive attitude towards a particular group or arguably important issue, and that they express that in a place where it is overheard or, let's say, overseen, is it improper for a witness to bring that to light due to this person's position of influence?
May I take that one?
Please.
Certainly you may.
All right. I don't think it's improper to address it. I think there is a degree of appropriate approach that was missing. And I'm also going to say up front, my opinion of the dean who did that makes me wonder about the quality of education that they're overseeing, because clearly their level of intelligence was somewhat low that morning, that day. It's not that topics are divisive. Topics in and of themselves are topics. Subjects are in and of themselves subjects. It is the attitude and the determination of what to do with my attitude versus your attitude versus your attitude. That it's the behavior that is divisive. It is the insistence that someone must be more right than anybody else. It is the arrogance, the lack of humility that says, I might not know everything, that allows somebody to, one, be dismissive to begin with. What right do you have? Seriously, what right do you have to be dismissive? Are you so wise? Are you so all-knowing that you can be dismissive of someone's stand, perspective, or viewpoint? And to the other individual, what the heck were you thinking? Do you think of yourself as somebody who sows divisive perspectives and attitudes and actions? Do you think of yourself as someone who values anybody else?
I think we're all old enough. I'm sorry, go ahead, Kimi.
Go ahead. I was going to say, it's not the topic. It's the behavior that makes it divisive. And I think the person who was being dismissive publicly should think about what their responsibility is. They were wrong. I believe they were wrong.
Well, you know,
Before
I
you come
think,
in, Mark.
yes, go ahead, Rabbi.
Maybe
Go
I'd like
ahead.
to put you on the hot seat. Had you been sitting behind this person, behind these deans, and witnessed the text exchange, how would you handle it?
I would have walked up to them or passed them a note and said, are you aware that your texts are being traded in a public venue where more than you can see them? And do you really think this is appropriate? For some people, they'll say, what a school marm attitude. Oh my God, does she really live in our world?
Knowing that the dean was also a participant in this, although he didn't out himself, if I had been looking at his phone, I might have been inclined to tap him on the shoulder and say, wow, dude, judging from what you're texting right now, it's a good thing you're not the dean.
You know, I tend to think I would also approach them personally. And I remember, I think all of us are, how do I say this delicately? I want to be politically correct. Okay, we've all lived on this planet long enough to remember a day when people said, you know what? I disagree with you completely. We can agree to disagree, and I respect your opinion. But please bear in mind X, Y, Z. That kind of discourse took place when I was a kid growing up. And here I am in my 60s wondering what happened to the world. Because there was a time we could say, look, we clearly don't agree on this, but your approach, brother, that really is not cool. You realize what could happen if that becomes public, right? I mean, bring it to your dining room and talk there, but please, not here. I mean, look at this. And we would say, I agree, we disagree, I respect your opinion, I don't agree with it. But there was a certain level of civility in handling these situations. But now with social media, everyone believes they have the right, indeed the responsibility, to mount their trusty high horse and declare to the world why you are wrong and see what we can do to get you fired, to get you out of there, to get you canceled. And that seems to be the go-to method now for many. And I can't prove this, but I'm led to understand that's probably the way our younger generations operate. That's their norm. And, you know, Mark, you mentioned earlier, you go back to being a young person, you would have to suffer this too long. There are times I do feel like an anachronism. I don't belong here, because the way we choose to handle some of these situations with discourse, with civility, with conversation seems to be out the door. I disagree. I'm going to tweet. I'm going to exit. It's going to be out there, and you will be in trouble, my friend. So there, take that.
I think that Rabbi Jonassen's point, though, is been very gently made, and at the same time is a very strong indicator of different people's interpretation of what leadership really means in terms of responsibility. And if you are responsible for educating people to hopefully inspire use of their critical thinking capacities, that means being able to look at it and say, all right, I don't agree with your perspective. I respect your right to have that opinion. I don't agree with it. Perhaps it's time for another topic. But the use of emojis, honestly, how old are you?
We're actually we're working our way back toward cave art. That's what that's all about. Mark, before you said what you said most recently, I was going to say, wow, no, in this whole conversation, nobody's yet used the R word, and that was going to be respect. And then you and Kimi both used the other one, which is responsibility. And I wonder about the relationship between those two things. And I also, based on what you said, Mark, I wonder if somehow the definition of responsibility has been changing, or if sands have been shifting under it or something. Because it occurs to me that if we are respectful enough, wouldn't we therefore consider it our responsibility to mind our own business when it's appropriate, and to keep our yaps shut when it's appropriate? And it's not our responsibility to have an opinion about everything. Maybe if we saw it more as our responsibility to listen and think about what we would otherwise be offended by, maybe we'd creep back toward unity or something.
All I can say is, in brief response to that, is as I look back at recent posts I've read on X and much lesser used Facebook, I realize I see a certain tone from individuals who don't even know each other, who feel they have the right and the responsibility to set other people straight. And I think the boundaries have been erased completely. And what I grew up with, I'm Jamaican by birth, and I heard the phrase common human decency a lot growing up in the 1960s and 70s. And I wonder if people even know what common human decency, respect, responsibility, and civility are anymore. So my concern really is the belief that we have the right to not only state our opinion, to do so vociferously, to use expletives, whatever, to vilify people we don't even know based upon 8 or 9 words I see on my screen. And I don't believe we understand what those boundaries are. I will not disagree that when we are in leadership, we have definitely a level of responsibility, particularly when we're leading in an area where education is supposed to take place. It begs the question, what are you then teaching the young people, impressionable young people, whose minds are different, who are living in this culture? How can we help, for lack of a better phrase, right the ship, so to speak? And I'm not sure I have the answer for that question.
I admit, I wanted to explain why I was laughing. I recently abandoned a platform because I was taken to the woodshed on it. I had posted a plea, would you please not play music so loud that I can hear it inside of my house at 10 o'clock at night or 4 o'clock in the morning? I think that is quite reasonable. And I was taken to the woodshed by people who've never even met me. And I know that they're neighbors who've never met me because I've only met 3 of my neighbors. And the funny one was, do this, this, and this. Don't be a Karen. Well, as it happens, my name is Karen Kimi Ziemski.
You are Karen.
So
That's
I
funny.
am a Karen. And
That is
I'm
funny.
probably a Karen.
Well, I'm never inviting you back again. That's it.
I know. How could
Rabbi,
you?
you're gonna cancel. Rabbi, you're gonna cancel Kimi now. Come on,
If you
Rabbi.
have parents who made you Karen, then you're just not welcome here.
So I just posted a note that said, this has been a very interesting experience, and I've previously used this platform to get input on vendors or service providers or things like that, and I think I'm going to go back to using it just for that.
I think I'm familiar with that platform. I'll say no more.
I think the breakdown of civility is something that has been talked about at great length. Because when you can say whatever you want without any kind of repercussions, then the motivation to be civil, if it's not one of your core values, it just disappears.
Mhm.
You know, Mark, you may or may not remember this, but at the beginning of, excuse me, of my radio show, I always deliberately say something completely ridiculous about Middletown, Connecticut, which is where I live. And I was thinking that for this coming Monday's show, I would say that this next weekend, Middletown is going to be hosting its annual amateur intercontinental ballistic missile launching tournament. But it seems to me that's exactly what X is. It's all these complete hackers, exactly as you just described, Jonas, and with no fear or possibility of repercussions or consequences, just launching stuff all day. And so people say to me, well, you know, what do you do on your Twitter or X account? And I say nothing, because I don't have one. I don't want to witness that, and I certainly won't be a part of it.
Well, you know, I think some of this may have begun, and again, I think, with the individuals who would look at the lives of the famous, rich, and the celebrated. And, you know, I once read where someone said, if you're a politician, an athlete, a performer,
Wow.
you can't expect any privacy because you're in a public, you have a public life, and you don't deserve any privacy because you put yourself there by what you do. That's the way some people think. You're a celebrity, you don't get privacy. So yeah, you're in the market with your 5-year-old kid trying to buy groceries. I must be there with a photograph that may earn me $10,000, and I don't care your child is with you. It doesn't matter. It's about what I can get from you. You're a celebrity, you don't deserve privacy. And somehow those boundaries kind of moved and shifted. Now you're a citizen. You don't deserve privacy. What?
I think there's a whole other side to that, Mark, and I think it has enormous cultural implications. And bear with me for just a second, but I'll tell you what I mean. Have any of you ever seen Beatlemania?
Yes.
I have not.
I resisted seeing that thing forever because I had no interest in seeing 5 or 4 guys pretend to be the Beatles. And then I saw it and I was astounded. And I came out of it wondering, wow, did the Beatles' music influence popular culture and political culture, or vice versa? So when I think about, I don't know who to say first, politicians or professional athletes who do and say whatever they want, and then it's almost as if life imitates either politics or professional athletics, because they can always say, that wasn't me. Oh, I didn't really mean that. That was taken out of context. I mean, the most absurd thing I can think of is that the young man who plays for the Memphis Grizzlies, his name is Ja Morant. In March and May of 2023, he was caught on videotape brandishing guns, and he said, "No, that's not me. That's not like me. I don't do that." So, I mean, it goes back to recorded evidence that can't be denied, and although I should say, and yet people deny it and get away with it, and we accept it. And that has enormous implications, it seems to me.
Yeah, to your point, Mark, and I think we'll start wrapping things up. There's still the second segment. That the way you phrase it, or the way you're saying it over, you know, they don't deserve privacy. I think that's a dangerous outlook. But I think there's a certain reality that becoming a celebrity means you are celebrated. And there goes with that a certain presumption that I'm not going to have the same level of privacy that average people do. And that should bring a certain greater sense of responsibility, as you're saying, Mark, a greater awareness. I'm in the public eye. I have an obligation. There's noblesse oblige that goes with that.
And,
And
and
how
we've
can you
also
find-
fallen into the trap of granting those public figures authority.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Well,
Hmm.
yeah.
Good point, Mark. Good point.
Power of reference.
When they start expressing their opinions about things that they have absolutely no qualifications.
I mean, you hear some people in Hollywood talking and you think, wow, what planet do they live on, or what rock do they live under? It's just incredible.
But they have a platform, and therefore they'll tell you who to vote for. They'll tell you what issues are important. And I cannot chuckle. I've seen it happen a lot in the last 10 years. I think to myself, here's someone who spends his life pretending to be someone else, who is now going to tell me how to vote, how to live my life, where to live, who to talk to, who not to. I think it's ridiculous and ludicrous. But I go back to what Jonathan said. There has to be a level of understanding. Okay, I have earned it. How do I navigate this responsibly and respectfully? But sometimes, again, our belief, and by the way, Jonathan, I was quoting someone who I would read. I wasn't giving an opinion. I was quoting what I read. You don't have the right to any privacy because you are a public figure. That was their position, and they were loud and clear in stating it. But at the same time, don't these individuals have families as well? They have children. They have lives they want to live, and their whole life is not behind a camera or on a stage. So how do we balance all of that? I'm not sure I have the perfect answer for that question.
Yeah, no, and I don't think there is a
There are
perfect
people
answer
who
to that
have.
question.
There are people who have done, but I think Jonathan's point about absolutely you have opened your life up. You know, we're all on camera right now.
Yes.
I'm sure at least one person's thinking, does that woman not know how to clean her desk? It's probably me, but
The hundreds of
I
thousands of
guarantee
people
you,
watching this, I'm sure there's
if there is somebody from that platform I just left who would even be curious enough, they're going to say, see, I knew she was somebody like that.
I'm going to jump to your defense and say that a cluttered desk is a sign of genius.
I'm there. Besides, I can find things on there.
That's right, two desks, the one in
but I
front of the
think
camera and the one behind the camera.
Right. There is an expectation, if you have put yourself in the public eye, that you think about what you do with that exposure in a responsible fashion. And I want to point out, there are a number of people who are in very public professions, and you've never seen a picture of any of their kids.
Mm.
Yeah.
Well,
So
let me just
maybe that brought it forward, saying, okay, I do have a diminished expectation for privacy, and here is where I'm going to spend that capital.
Mm.
I'm going to protect my kids. And maybe until they have something that they care about so very much, it doesn't occur to them.
Wow.
Well said.
That's another great point.
Yeah. I'd just like to bring up one point before we wrap this up here. And I live in St. Louis, but I grew up in California, and my childhood hero was Harry Truman. And a number of years ago, they discovered a diary of his that had been previously unknown. And in it, he makes a number of disparaging remarks about Jews.
Mhm.
And it was talk in the Jewish community and beyond about, should this change the way we look at Harry Truman? And to my mind, the answer was not at all. Because he grew up in a time and a place where those types of references, those types of cultural attitudes were part of the wider culture. And that very likely he absorbed them. But when you look at his behavior, you look at his conduct, his best friend and business partner was a Jew. He recognized the state of Israel before any other country at incredible political risk. His attitude towards the Ku Klux Klan was always ferociously against them. I'm much more concerned with the way a person behaves
Mm.
than with attitudes that they may have that are not quite perfectly on target, that they likely absorbed, and that they make an effort to not air in public. And there's a certain compartmentalization that calls for. I think we all have biases, conscious or unconscious. I think we all may make off-color remarks at times when we think nobody's listening. And we may drift into humor that's not quite fit for consumption.
And we may have to practice biting our tongue on occasion.
Yeah, and we're trying. We may be trying to do better. I have a whole repertoire of jokes I don't tell anymore because they're just, I think we've moved on, and I don't even want to show them in private. But being able to balance that sense of accountability in our behavior and in the attitudes that we should want to have, against our natural proclivities that may not always be right on target. That's part of being human.
Here's my last thought, which comes as a question regarding those 3 deans who were suspended. I have no idea what their life track record is, what they've accomplished, what they've done, whom they've helped. And sadly, one exchange privately with a friend by text, filmed by someone else and publicized, could effectively erase 40 or 50 years of good work. And that concerns me.
And then going back to the Harry Truman issue, a lot of it has to do with trust. If I have established trust, then it's going to be easier for others to presume positive intent when they see something that appears to be out of character.
Or a little dicey.
Or what, Kim?
A little dicey. I get forgiven a lot.
Well, we want to be forgiven. The question is, are we so quick to forgive? And that I'm not too sure about either.
Point well taken.
Yeah.
Point well taken. I think there is also the kinds of behaviors that have sown divisiveness and have chipped away at the respect for civility and the practice of civility have also created, to a large extent, I believe, have helped to create that epidemic of loneliness that is so rampant. Our Surgeon General even discusses it, because it's a lot harder to feel bonds and relationships with people if we have even just a tiny bit of fear of being misrepresented, misunderstood, any number of things. And the grace that is lacking in the fomentation of that kind of fear, that's really what I'm afraid of.
I think it's corrosive, and it doesn't serve any of us. So
contagious.
For those of you who can stick around for a brief next segment, I hope you will if you have the time. Those of you who are watching now, listening now, if you're not paid members, you can hear the backstage conversation that follows. Go to my Substack, you can sign up there. And if you have a topic you would like us to take up in a future episode, please go to my website, ethicsninja.com, use the contact information, submit your idea. If it's compelling, we will take it up. And until then, thank you. Mark Brown, Mark O'Brien, Kimi Hirotsu Ziemski. Wonderful conversation going in many different directions. And as always, I encourage you to continue grappling with the gray.